Close your eyes for a second and picture yourself in ancient Egypt. You're surrounded by colossal temples, golden statues as tall as buildings, priests burning incense before deities with animal heads. Every river, every wheat field, every sunrise belongs to a different god. And Pharaoh, the man seated on the throne, is not just a king. To the Egyptians, he is a god in the flesh. Now open the book of Exodus and read the 10 plagues. Blood, frogs, insects, hail, darkness. If you've always read them as a list of natural catastrophes God hurled at Egypt to convince Pharaoh to free Israel, you've missed 90% of the story, because every single plague had a target, not the Egyptian people, not the crops, not the livestock. The targets were the gods of Egypt themselves. Every plague was a declaration of theological war, a surgical strike against a specific deity of the Egyptian pantheon. And the original Hebrew text says it plainly, with words that English translations have completely erased. Today we're reconstructing that code, plague by plague, God by God. And by the end, I promise you one thing: you will never read Exodus the same way again. But before we get into the plagues, you need to understand something fundamental that changes everything. The word our Bibles translate as plagues doesn't actually mean plagues in Hebrew. The original term is makkot, and makkot does not describe a disease or a natural calamity. It means strikes, deliberate strikes, judicial blows, like a judge slamming a gavel in a courtroom. Every makkah is a verdict pronounced against a specific defendant. And in Exodus chapter 12, verse 12, God himself declares his intent explicitly. He says, translated directly from the Hebrew, "I will execute judgments against all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord." He doesn't say, "I will punish the Egyptians." He doesn't say, "I will show my power." He says, "I will judge their gods." This is a cosmic courtroom scene, a divine tribunal where the defendants are the Egyptian deities. And this changes everything, because it means the 10 plagues are not random. They are a designed sequence, like a prosecutor presenting evidence one piece at a time, dismantling the defense layer by layer. To understand just how precise this attack was, you need to know how Egyptian religion worked. It wasn't like Greek polytheism, where the gods lived on Mount Olympus and occasionally came down to cause trouble. In Egypt, the gods were the fabric of reality itself. Every natural element, the water, the earth, the sky, the sun, life, death, was governed by a deity. And these deities were not abstract, they were physically present. In the Nile, in the frogs, in the sun that rises every morning, in the sacred animals the priests fed inside the temples. For an Egyptian, denying their gods meant denying reality itself. It would be like someone telling you today that gravity doesn't exist. It wasn't a matter of faith. It was a matter of daily evidence. Every morning the sun rose. Every year the Nile flooded and brought fertility. Every harvest grew. The gods worked. And Pharaoh was the living proof. He was the son of the sun god Ra, the incarnate deity, the link between heaven and earth. So when God says, "I will judge their gods," he's not making a rhetorical speech. He's announcing that he will dismantle this entire structure of reality, one piece at a time. And the way he does it is breathtakingly precise. Let's start with the first plague. Moses raises his staff and strikes the waters of the Nile. The water turns to blood. All the fish die. The Nile stinks. The Egyptians can no longer drink. Now, for us, this is an environmental catastrophe. But for an Egyptian in 1400 BC, it was something far worse. The Nile was not just a river. The Nile was Hapi. Hapi was the god of the inundation, one of the most revered deities in Egypt. He was depicted as a man with a swollen belly of abundance, with papyrus and lotus plants on his head, pouring water from 2 vases. Every year, when the Nile flooded and made the surrounding land fertile, the Egyptians didn't say, "It's raining a lot this year." They said, "Hapi is generous." All of Egypt's agriculture, all of its economy, all of its life depended on the benevolence of Hapi. And there's more. The Egyptians believed the Nile was literally the blood of Osiris, the god of the dead and resurrection. The waters of the Nile were not water. They were the lifeblood of the god himself. And now, look at what happens in the Hebrew text. The word used for blood is dam. In Hebrew, dam does not simply indicate the red liquid. It carries with it the idea of violent death, of capital judgment. When God turns the Nile into dam, he's not merely changing the color of the water. He's declaring the god of the Nile dead. The blood of Osiris, the lifeblood that sustained Egypt, is transformed into a symbol of death. The god who was supposed to protect the river couldn't even protect himself, and that's just the first strike. Think about that for a moment. If the most sacred thing in your culture, the very source of your life, suddenly stopped working, what would happen inside your head? What certainties would collapse? Because the real question is not what happened 3,000 years ago on the banks of the Nile. The question is, in your life, what are you placing your security in? What is your Nile? Your job? Your relationship? Your bank account? Your reputation? What is that one thing that if it stopped working tomorrow morning would make you feel like reality itself was crumbling? Exodus is not just about ancient Egyptians. It's about anyone who has built their identity on something that is not God. Hold that thought, because it's coming back. Second plague, frogs. Of all the plagues, this one seems the most ridiculous. Frogs everywhere. In the beds, in the houses, in the ovens, in the kitchens. If you're thinking, what do frogs have to do with a divine war? It's because you don't know who Heket was. Heket was one of the most important goddesses in everyday Egyptian life. She was depicted as a woman with the head of a frog, and she presided over fertility and childbirth. When an Egyptian woman gave birth, the midwives invoked Heket. Frogs were considered sacred precisely because they represented this goddess. Killing a frog in Egypt was a sacrilegious act. And now look at the brilliance of the judgment. God doesn't destroy the frogs. He multiplies them. He makes them so numerous they become unbearable. The sacred creatures invade every corner of life. You walk and you crush them. You open a plate and find one inside. You lie down in bed and feel them on your skin. The object of your worship becomes your torment. There's a profoundly deep principle here. When you idolize something, at first it feels like a blessing, but when that thing takes over your life, it becomes a prison. The money that was supposed to give you security keeps you awake at night. The relationship that was supposed to make you happy suffocates you. The success that was supposed to bring you peace fills you with anxiety. The idol you worship becomes the frog in your bed. Pharaoh understands. He calls Moses and asks for the frogs to be removed. Moses asks him, "When do you want me to pray for you?" And Pharaoh incredibly answers, "Tomorrow, tomorrow." He's got frogs in his plate, in his bed, everywhere, and he says, "Take care of it tomorrow." If that sounds absurd, think about how many times you've said the same thing. You know something in your life isn't working. You know you need to change, but you say, "Starting Monday, next month. When I finish this project, tomorrow." Pharaoh would rather sleep one more night with the frogs than surrender today. And maybe you would too. Third plague. Moses tells Aaron to strike the dust of the earth with his staff, and the dust turns into kinim. Our Bibles translate it as gnats or lice, but the Hebrew term is more complex. Kinim could indicate small, stinging insects that emerge from the earth itself. The land of Egypt, the dust, the soil, everything becomes a vehicle of torment. And here the target is Geb, the god of the earth. Geb was often depicted lying on the ground, his green body representing vegetation. The land of Egypt was the body of Geb. Every seed planted was entrusted to his protection. Every foundation of every temple and palace rested on him. But there's a detail that almost nobody notices. This is the first moment when Pharaoh's magicians fail. With the blood of the Nile, they had replicated the miracle. With the frogs too. But with the dust of the earth becoming life, they can't do it. And they say to Pharaoh an incredible phrase, "This is the finger of God." In Hebrew, Etzba Elohim, the finger of God. It's the first time in Exodus that the representatives of Egyptian religion acknowledge a power superior to their gods. They don't say, "We're tired," or "We don't have the right ingredients." They say, "This is divine, and it's not ours." The priests of the most advanced magical tradition in the ancient world admit defeat. The Egyptian magicians were famous throughout the ancient world. Their practices were sophisticated, and their reputation was legendary. And yet, faced with the third plague, they surrender. Not out of weakness, but out of honesty. They recognize something that Pharaoh will refuse to recognize for 7 more plagues. And this happens today too. Sometimes the people around you see the truth before you do. Your friends see that relationship is destroying you. Your co-workers see you're burning out. Your mother sees you're running from something. But you, like Pharaoh, harden your heart and push forward. Now we enter the heart of the sequence, where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Fourth plague. Arov in Hebrew. Our Bibles translate it as flies or swarms, but the Hebrew word is more ambiguous. It could mean a mixture of different insects, a wild swarm of creatures. And many scholars connect this plague to Khepri, the scarab god. Khepri was the god of the rising sun. He was depicted as a man with a scarab beetle for a head, or as an enormous scarab pushing the sun disk across the morning sky. The sacred scarab, or dung beetle, was one of the most revered insects in Egypt. Royal seals bore the image of the scarab. Scarab-shaped amulets were placed on the hearts of the dead to guide them in the afterlife. And God sends a swarm. The sacred insect that Egyptians wore as a protective amulet becomes the agent of their punishment. But there's a new element that appears for the first time with this plague, and it changes the rules of the game. Exodus chapter 8, verse 22. On that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people dwell, and no swarm shall be there. For the first time, God draws a visible boundary. On one side, Egypt is devastated. On the other, Goshen, where Israel lives, is completely untouched. This is not a meteorological accident. This is not a geographical coincidence. This is a deliberate surgical distinction. In Hebrew, the word used is pedut, which means redemption or distinction. God is literally saying, I will make a redemption between my people and your people. The physical separation between Egypt and Goshen is an image of the spiritual separation between those who serve idols and those who serve the living God. And this hits deep if you think about it. Because in your life, the consequences of the plagues you go through, the stress, the crises, the falls, are not the same for everyone. There is a difference between walking through a storm alone and walking through it with an invisible protection. Goshen was not stronger than Egypt. It didn't have thicker walls or better soldiers. The only difference was this: God had drawn a line. Fifth plague: a pestilence strikes the Egyptian livestock. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep. All the livestock of Egypt dies. But the text specifies, of the livestock of the children of Israel, not one died. The targets here are multiple. Hathor, the cow goddess, was one of the most beloved deities in Egypt. She was depicted as a woman with bovine horns and the solar disk between them, or directly as a cow. The temples of Hathor were among the most beautiful in Egypt. She presided over love, beauty, joy, and music. But there was also Apis, the sacred bull. The Apis bull was considered the living incarnation of the god Ptah, and later became associated with Osiris. A single bull, identified by specific markings on its coat, was kept in the Temple of Memphis, cared for like a deity, and upon its death was mummified with the same honors reserved for pharaohs. The tombs of the Apis bulls, the Serapeum of Saqqara, have been discovered by archaeologists, and they are absolutely monumental. And God strikes the animals, the living idols, the flesh and blood deities that Egyptians could touch, feed, worship every day. Imagine what it meant for a priest of Hathor to walk into the temple and find the sacred cow dead. Imagine what it meant for the keepers of Apis to see the divine bull collapse to the ground. This was not just an economic loss. This was the visible death of their gods. There's a personal angle I can't skip. We all have our own sacred bulls, that tangible thing in our lives that we treat as if it were divine. The house, the body, the child you've turned into, your entire reason for living. There's nothing wrong with loving these things. The problem is when you put them on the throne, when they become the thing without which you cannot function. Because the plagues of Exodus teach an uncomfortable truth. Whatever you put on the throne will eventually be put to the test. Sixth plague. And here things get personal in a completely new way. God tells Moses to take ashes from a furnace and throw them toward the sky in front of Pharaoh. The ashes spread over all the land of Egypt and cause boils and sores on people and animals. The targets here are the gods of healing. Isis, the Great Mother, the supreme sorceress, the one who, according to Egyptian mythology, had the power to cure any disease and even resurrect the dead. And Thoth, the god of wisdom and medicine, whom the priests invoked in healing rituals. But the devastating detail is something else. Exodus chapter 9, verse 11. The magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils were on the magicians and on all the Egyptians. The magicians themselves, the healing priests, the living representatives of the power of Isis and Thoth, can't even stand up. The people who were supposed to cure the disease are the sickest of all. And the furnace ashes. This is not random. The Hebrew word kivshan indicates a brick kiln, the same kind of furnace where the Israelite slaves were forced to work. The ashes of slavery are thrown skyward and fall back as judgment on the oppressors. The instrument of your oppression becomes the instrument of your liberation. What was burning you is now burning the one who held you prisoner. Think about that for a second. Is there something in your life that has crushed you? A painful experience, a dark season, a failure that left a mark? Exodus suggests something radical. Those ashes are not just ashes. In God's hands, the thing that destroyed you can become the thing that sets you free. Your deepest wound can become your strongest message. If you're still here, you're not a casual viewer. You're the kind of person who wants to go deeper than surface-level Bible reading. Hit subscribe so you don't miss next week's deep dive into the original text. We do this every week. Now, the first 6 plagues dismantled the gods of earth, water, and daily life. The last 4 aim higher, much higher. 7th plague, hail, but not ordinary hail. Look at what the Hebrew text says in Exodus chapter 9, verse 24. And there was hail, and fire flaming in the midst of the hail, a very grievous thing, such as had never been in all the land of Egypt, since it became a nation. Fire flaming in the midst of the hail. Stop for a moment on that image. Fire inside ice. 2 opposite elements coexisting within the same phenomenon. The Hebrew text uses esh mitlakachat betok habarad, literally fire grasping itself in the middle of the hail. Not fire alongside the hail, fire inside the hail, a miracle within a miracle. The target is Nut, the goddess of the sky. Nut was depicted as a woman arched over the earth. Her body was the starry sky, and she swallowed the sun every evening to give birth to it every morning. The sky was her domain, and Nut protected Egypt from celestial catastrophe. And the sky rebels. The domain of Nut vomits fire and ice simultaneously, something physically impossible. The goddess of the sky cannot protect even a blade of grass. The fields are devastated, the trees shattered, the remaining livestock killed. And here, something happens that has never occurred before in the entire narrative. Exodus chapter 9, verse 27. Pharaoh sent and called for Moses and Aaron and said to them, I have sinned this time. The Lord is righteous, and I and my people are the guilty ones. For the first time, Pharaoh admits he is wrong. For the first time, he uses the word sinned. For the first time, he calls the God of Israel righteous. For a man who considers himself a deity, this is a massive crack. The wall is giving way. But as we'll see, a crack is not a surrender. Pharaoh will harden his heart again the moment the hail stops, because there is a difference between feeling the pressure of truth and yielding to it. Pharaoh feels the pressure, but he does not yield. And how many times do we do the same? How many times, in the middle of a crisis, do we say, I get it, I'll change, and then, as soon as the pressure eases, go right back to exactly where we were? Pharaoh's heart is not an Egyptian defect. It's a human one. 8th plague, locusts. And here we enter the territory of cultural annihilation. God sends an east wind that carries a swarm of locusts like Egypt has never seen. The text says the locusts cover the eye of the earth, making the ground invisible. They devour everything the hail had spared. Every fruit, every green plant, every trace of vegetation. Egypt is stripped bare. The targets are Min and Seth. Min was the god of the harvest and agricultural fertility. Seth, among his many functions, was associated with deserts and storms, but also with protecting the harvest from calamity. The fact that the locusts arrive, carried by wind, through the air and the desert, strikes directly at the domain of both. But there's a detail in the Hebrew text that few people notice. The wind that brings the locusts comes from the east, Ruach Kadim. In Hebrew, the word Kadim, east, shares its root with Kedem, which means ancient or primordial. The wind from the east in the Bible is often associated with divine judgment. It appears in the parting of the Red Sea. It appears in the prophets. It is the wind of God himself. And the wind that removes the locusts comes from the west, from the sea, Ruach Yam. 2 winds, one brings judgment, the other brings grace, but only after the judgment has run its course. there's an incredible moment just before the locusts arrive. Pharaoh's servants, his own advisors, plead with him, "How long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is destroyed?" His own people are begging him to surrender, and Pharaoh refuses. This is the point where stubbornness stops being courage and becomes self-destruction. When the people closest to you are all telling you the same thing and you refuse to listen, you're not strong, you're in chains. And the irony of Exodus is that Pharaoh, the man who holds Israel prisoner, is himself the greatest prisoner in the story. A prisoner of his pride, a prisoner of his throne, a prisoner of the self-image he cannot abandon. Ninth plague, and here we reach the theological climax of the entire sequence, the blow no Egyptian would have ever thought possible. God tells Moses to stretch out his hand toward the sky, and darkness descends on Egypt. For 3 days, no Egyptian can see anything. They cannot rise from where they sit. Total blackness swallows everything. The target is Ra, the supreme God, the sun itself. You need to understand what Ra meant to Egypt. Ra was not a god. Ra was the god, the head of the pantheon, the source of all life, all light, all cosmic order. Pharaoh himself carried the title Son of Ra. Every morning, when the sun rose on the horizon, it was not an astronomical phenomenon. It was Ra winning his nightly battle against the serpent Apep, the monster of chaos, and returning to bring order to the world. Extinguishing the sun meant one thing only: Ra has lost. Chaos has won. The cosmic order has been overturned. For an Egyptian, 3 days without the sun were not an inconvenience. They were the end of the world, literally. It meant the serpent Apep had swallowed Ra, and that the eternal cycle of creation had been shattered. But the Hebrew text goes even deeper. The word used to describe this darkness is not the ordinary choshek you'd find in everyday language. The text adds choshek afela, darkness of afela, and afela describes a dense, palpable, tangible blackness. Exodus chapter 10, verse 21 says literally, darkness that can be touched. This is not dark. It is substance. It is dark matter. It is as if space itself had become solid. And this directly echoes Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Darkness was on the face of the deep. The same kind of primordial darkness that existed before creation. God is returning Egypt to the state that existed before creation. He's saying, without me, this is your natural state. This is what remains when you strip away the light, the order, the civilization. What's left is primordial chaos and emptiness. For 3 days, the Egyptians experience non-existence. They are paralyzed, blind, unable to function as human beings, suspended in nothingness. And during those 3 days, on the other side of the border, in Goshen, there is light. The text says it explicitly, but all the children of Israel had light in their dwellings, the same land, the same moment, 2 completely different realities. And think about that carefully. There are moments in your life when you feel exactly like this, when the sun seems to have gone out, when you can't see the road ahead of you, when the darkness is so thick it feels like a physical thing, something pressing down on you. Exodus tells you that darkness is not the last word, that even in the middle of the deepest night, there is a place where the light has not gone out. Goshen still exists, even for you. But Pharaoh does not surrender even now. After 9 plagues, after every god he's ever worshipped has been humiliated, after his own magicians admitted defeat, after his own council pleaded with him, after the sun itself went out, Pharaoh says to Moses, "Get away from me. Be careful never to see my face again, for on the day you see my face, you will die." And Moses answers, "You have spoken well. I will never see your face again." The curtain is about to fall, and what happens next is the most devastating blow of all. 10th plague, the death of the firstborn. At midnight, God passes through the land of Egypt. Every firstborn dies, from the son of Pharaoh seated on the throne to the son of the prisoner in the dungeon. The cry that rises from Egypt that night is a cry the Hebrew text describes as tziyaka gedola, a great cry, the same term used for the cry of the Israelites under slavery. The cry of the oppressor becomes the mirror of the cry of the oppressed. But why the firstborn? This is not random cruelty. In Egyptian culture, the firstborn was the bearer of divine blessing, the heir of sacred power. Pharaoh's firstborn was not merely a prince. He was the next living god, the next son of Ra, the guarantee that the divine cycle would continue. And Pharaoh himself was considered a cosmic firstborn, son of Ra, firstborn among gods and men. To strike the firstborn of Egypt was to strike the very chain of Egyptian divinity. It was saying, "Your system of gods begetting gods, passing power from father to son, maintaining cosmic order through sacred descent, all of it stops tonight. The line is broken." But the story of Exodus does not end with death. It ends with a lamb. Before the 10th plague, God gives Israel a precise instruction. Every family must take a male lamb without defect on the 10th day of the month, keep it in the house until the 14th day, and then sacrifice it at twilight. The blood of the lamb must be painted on the doorposts and the lintel, and when God passes through in the night, seeing the blood, he will pass over that house. This is where the term Pesach, Passover, comes from. In Hebrew, it literally means to pass over or to skip over. But there is a layer here that most people miss. The Hebrew word used for the Passover animal is seh, a young sheep from the flock, and the sheep was sacred to Amun, who in his fusion with Ra had become Amun-Ra, the supreme deity of New Kingdom Egypt. Amun was often depicted as a man with the head of a ram, and his sacred flocks were untouchable throughout Egypt. God is asking Israel to do something that for Egyptians would have been an act of sacrilegious warfare. Take the sacred animal of Amun-Ra, keep it in your house for 4 days in plain sight, then kill it and paint its blood on your door. It's a public declaration of loyalty. You're choosing whose side you're on. You cannot sacrifice the lamb and continue to revere Amun-Ra. You have to choose. And this choice is the heart of Exodus. It's not just a story of political liberation. It's a story of inner liberation. Before physically leaving Egypt, Israel had to spiritually leave Egypt. They had to stop worshipping the gods of their oppressors. They had to paint the blood on the door, visible to everyone, and declare, "I no longer belong to this system." In your life, what is your Egypt? I'm not talking about a physical place. I'm talking about that system of thought, of habit, of dependency, of false identity that holds you prisoner. Maybe it's the need for other people's approval. Maybe it's an image of yourself that doesn't match who you really are. Maybe it's a relationship you know is toxic, but you can't leave because you're afraid of what's on the other side. Exodus tells you that before walking toward freedom, you need to make a public decision. You need to paint the blood on the door. You need to declare to yourself and to the world that you no longer serve those gods. And yes, it's terrifying. It's terrifying because those gods are familiar to you. The Egypt you know is always more comfortable than the desert you don't. But here is the paradox of Exodus. The promised land cannot be reached without the desert. Freedom cannot be obtained without walking through uncertainty. And the darkest night, the night of the 10th plague, is also the night of liberation. When you put it all together, the pattern is impossible to ignore. There is not a single element of the Egyptian pantheon that survives intact. The sacred water turns to blood. The sacred animals become torment. The sacred earth produces insects. The sacred sky vomits hail of fire. The sacred harvest is devoured. The sacred sun goes dark. The sacred lineage dies. Every plague climbs a level, from the earth to the water, from the water to the animals, from the animals to human bodies, from bodies to the sky, from the sky to the sun, from the sun to life itself. It's an ascending staircase that dismantles Egyptian reality layer by layer until nothing remains. And when nothing remains, something new begins. The people of Israel leave Egypt in the darkness of night, with bread that had no time to rise, with sandals on their feet and staffs in their hands. They don't leave like a victorious army. They leave like slaves who don't yet know what it means to be free. And the first step toward freedom is not a step of strength, it's a step of faith. This is the deepest message of Exodus, the message no translation fully captures. The 10 plagues are not the story of an angry God punishing a wicked people. They are the story of a God who dismantles piece by piece everything that holds his people captive. Not just the physical chains of slavery, but the mental and spiritual chains of idolatry. Before Israel can be free in body, they must be free in soul. And before they can be free in soul, they must see with their own eyes that every false god they've clung to is powerless. Maybe you're going through your own plagues right now. Something in your life is crumbling and you don't understand why. The Nile you built everything on is turning to blood. The frogs of anxiety are flooding your life. Or maybe the sun that used to light your way has simply gone out. Exodus doesn't tell you these things don't happen. It tells you they are not the end of the story. It tells you that sometimes things need to collapse so something truer can emerge, that the darkness is not punishment, it's preparation, and that on the other side of the darkest night, there's a dawn that no Egyptian god could ever have given you. This is the story the Hebrew text tells when you read it in its original language. A story of divine war, of surgical dismantling, of idols falling one after another like dominoes, but also a story of liberation. Yours, mine, anyone who has the courage to look their idols in the eye and say, "I don't need you anymore." If this video opened your eyes to something you'd never seen in Exodus before, hit subscribe. Every week we go inside the original text of the Bible and uncover what the translations don't tell you. The next video goes even deeper into a passage everyone knows, but almost nobody truly understands. It's on screen right now.